Good evening, and thanks for joining tonight's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments. For tonight, we're going to take a look at the TI-84 tips and tricks for working with probability and statistics. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI Technology to make tough-to-teach, tough-to-learn concepts accessible to all my students. I'm really excited to introduce our two panelists tonight, Tammy Jones and Jeff McCullough. Tammy is currently a consultant working with districts, schools, teachers, and students from kindergarten through pre-service college. She has 30 years of experience in the classroom, with the last 25 years being in secondary mathematics and science. Tammy has been using Texas Instruments technology since 1974, and she's feeling a little under the weather. So Tammy, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Good evening to everyone. I'll just be a base tonight.
And Jeff co-founded the TI Inspire Super User Group with Bryson Perry. He teaches Algebra 2 and AP Statistics at St. Mary's Episcopal School in Memphis, Tennessee. In 2009, Jeff received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. He also authored the second edition of TI Inspire for Dummies and the second edition of TI-84 for Dummies. Thanks for being with us, Jeff.
Hey, it's good to be here. This might be the first all-Tennessee webinar ever.
You know?
It might be. I should probably move to Tennessee, and then we could truly make it.
Well, that's true.
Tennessee webinar. We're expecting a large crowd, so your audio is muted. Feel free to send questions to Jeff or Tammy using the Q&A window in the right section of your screen. This session is being recorded, and as a reminder, we'll provide a link to the event certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. Once the recording is available, if you'd like to follow along with your handheld or your software, we really hope you will. We do recommend doing that, though, with the recording and not necessarily trying to follow along point for point as Tammy and Jeff are working tonight. Might get a little bit confusing. They might go a little bit faster than what you'd like. So that's what the recording's for. Then we can go at your own pace and then pause, rewind as necessary. We don't expect you to have any audio issues, but if you do, try selecting Communicate in the WebEx menu, choose Audio Broadcast, and then click Join. At this point, Jeff is going to discuss our agenda.
So we hope to do some tips and tricks tonight that will help you. Some things maybe you didn't know were available, and maybe some little things that will help you a great deal. So we'll do box plots, all the basic stat stuff. We're going to also do some simulation using the probability simulation app. So tossing coins, all those kinds of things that you can do in your classroom. Stuff that you can use, even if you don't teach stats, I think you can use some of these things in your classroom.
And then don't forget to stick around because I'll be giving away a complimentary registration for a T-Cube Summer Workshop at the end of the webinar.
Wow, that's nice.
Pretty exciting stuff. And Tammy, would you mind discussing our expected outcomes?
Yeah, as Jeff said, we're hoping to take you on a journey with the Stat Wizards and how that can be used for your probability and stat commands. Also, as he commented on, looking at how to actually plot and analyze a list of data, and then looking at probability, which is in an interesting place, looking at that trajectory of standards and how that's going to work, and using the probability simulator app and just seeing all the cool things in there that you can do, and how some of that will actually tie back in and build on what Jeff did.
Thanks, Tammy. Jeff, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, the first thing we need, and Tammy, I'm going to need your help for this, is I'm going to go to the list, and it's actually kind of like the Microsoft command. You hit the stat and then edit key to get to your list. And so your list may look something like this. And I actually have a few things in my list number one. If you're in that situation, you can always click up arrow to get to the very top, the header. And this might be intuitive, but it might not be. If you hit clear, it doesn't look like anything happened, but if you go use the down arrow or press enter, you've now cleared that list, because I want to start with kind of a fresh list.
And Jeff, this is where How many students have we had that hit delete instead of clear and they lose their list?
So what would happen? Let's just go out and find out, because this happens. Thank you for adding that, Tammy. Sometimes students will hit the delete key instead of clear, and L1 has disappeared. It seems like forever. However, if you hit the stat key and you go to Setup Editor number 5 there, it's going to be back. Let's see what happens. So I say Setup Editor, done. If I go back to Stat, Edit, to where my lists are, there it is. It's back there again. So thank you for adding that point there, because sometimes students do hit delete, that's for sure. So Tammy, I need your help, and I need also the participants' help. So I want to get some data from our participants right now, and I need you to be honest. I need your age. So if you would, in the chat window, just put your age in there. And Tammy, as you see them, can you call them out to me? And I'll just start.
49.
35.
49. 30.
Okay.
68. 42. I'm
That's
skipping
interesting.
some. How many do you want? 46.
Oh, keep going, keep going.
29 and 9,500.
Oh, wait, 9,500 out. That sounds like an outlier.
Yeah, 66, 36, 40, 60, 46, 52, 52, 59, 45, 69, 73, 42, 59, 62, 72, 62, 46, 59, 53, 43, 60. How many do you want?
I need 8 more.
Okay, 67, 32, 50. I'm 57. Let me go back up here and catch a few more. 48, 62, 32. How many
One
more? 55. Here comes another one, 62.
Okay, 55 is good. So I've got 30 pieces of data in my list. And Tammy, you pointed this out. It's hard to type fast in the emulator, which is kind of good for our students, because if we go too fast when we're typing things in front of them, they can't follow us. And so it actually slows us down a little bit, because if I was on my handheld, I could have typed those in as fast as you could say them probably. But on the emulator, there's actually a little bit of delay there, which is good. It kind of slows us down. Don't you think that's good to have a little delay in there?
Yes.
Good. So,
and we both use our InterWrite tablets too, which kind of helps us level the playing field.
Sure, that does too. So it's always nice to slow down a little. We don't want to go too fast for our students. So I hit second mode, which is quit, and so I'm on a calculator page, and I want to do just kind of basic stats. I want to find out the mean, the median, those kinds of things. And so usually when you do that, you would hit the, let's see, stat key, and then you go to, let's see, calc, and there it is. This is the calculate menu. So these are drop-down menus at the top, and so if I hit right arrow, it goes to the test. It's all the AP stat type stuff here. But one variable stats is something that a lot of students will use a lot to find out all the vital information about some data. So if you press enter here, it goes to the first stat wizard, and that's what we mentioned. This is called the stat wizard. It used to kind of, you had to know the syntax for the command. It kind of walks you through it. So it says what list? Well, it defaults to L1, which is pretty nice. That's the list I wanted. Frequency list is if I had a list where each number was listed a certain number of times of frequency, I would list that. In a lot of cases, we don't use that. And then calculate, I'm just going to press enter here. And so it puts that on the screen, and it gives me all this information, but you have to kind of understand what some of this stuff is. And so X bar is the average. So the average age of the sample that I took, because I didn't get everyone's age, would be 49.86. So about 50 years old, approximately. The sum of the sample of the 30 folks would be 1496. You square those values and sum them, that's 78,000. And now these two things are standard deviation, and this first one is the more commonly used. We took a sample, so we would use the sample standard deviation, which is 12. And then this is the population standard deviation, which is 11.8. The difference between those two, the main difference in the formula is that you were dividing by n-1 for sample. divided by n for the population standard deviation. N is the number of terms. We had 30 in our group. And if you scroll down here, I'm going to scroll down a few clicks towards the bottom here. And you can see these last 5 things, commonly in math we refer to those as the 5-number summary. So like the minimum value, the Q1, which is the first quartile, the median, which is in the middle, which is very close to the mean there, 49.5, and then the upper quartile, Q3, and then the maximum value. The oldest person that was in my sample was 69 years old. I don't know if there was an older person in this or not. And so we had people all the way from 29 to 69 that made the sample there.
So Jeff, we have a question.
Sure.
How do you know when to use the population standard deviation versus the sample?
So we took a sample, so we're going to use a sample. And that's typically what we're doing in classrooms is we're taking samples, Oreos or whatever it is that we're doing. So that'd be the more common thing. So if we had all of the data, like if we had if the population was everyone on this webinar, we had all of that, that would be the population standard deviation if we had it all. But we only took a sample of 30 of the 100 or so, 100, 150 people we have on this webinar. Does that answer your question? Okay. So I'd like to kind of look at this data, a plot of it. And so this 5-number summary in math, we also often do the box plot. So if I go to second y equals, you can see this is where all your stat plot is. So you see in blue above the y equals key, it says stat plot. So these are all your stat plots. And if I click enter here, and the first one, I have all these choices. So the first thing I'm going to do is press on. And then I'm going to go down, and these are all the different types of plots that you can do. And so this first one, if I clicked it, it would give me 2 lists that would need to enter. That would be a scatter plot that's not connected points. If I go to the second one, this is a scatter plot with connected points. You can even change the kind of points you use. You can use these squares or these plus signs or these little boxes or the little kind of decimal points. If you go to the right here, this is a histogram, which is nice. So you usually need 1 list for the histogram, typically, unless you use a frequency list. And this is a box plot with outliers, which is my favorite type of box plot. I like to see if there's any outliers in the group. This is a box plot that will have the whiskers attached. So it's attached there. And this last one, Tammy, do you know what this one is?
Interstep function.
Interstep. When would you use that one, Tammy? Because I've never used it in my class.
Well, that's your normal plot if you want to use that in.
Oh, like a normal probability plot, kind of?
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Because you look at it and you can kind of see if it's normalized.
Oh, okay. Yeah, oh, that's a normal probability plot, I think. Yeah, that makes sense. So in AP Stat, you might use something like that. So I'm going to go back to this one, the box plot with outliers. It defaults automatically to list 1. And again, frequency, I wouldn't change any of those.
And Jeff,
yeah.
One more thing while you're there, go back up to the XList because this is something else that students do.
Yeah.
If they happen to be using a different list, you can't type the letter L and the number 2. You have to type L2 from the list over the digit 2.
Right. So there's a couple different ways to type a different list. So do you see in blue above these numbers here, like L1 in blue, L2, L3? So if I went second 2, that's actually L2. Another way to see all my lists that I might have in the calculator is to hit second stat, which is the list key. And those are all my lists, including a few that are kind of hidden that I have down here. So it shows all of those. And so I'm just going to choose list 1 because I really want to graph list 1. That's the only that I have. Oh, well, let me try that again. Second 1, list 1. So you want to choose your list there, and that's a great point because students sometimes try to type L1, and I don't think that works there. Although if you called your list average there, you could actually type the word average and it does work. And there's about 15 different colors that you can choose for your list here. I'm just going to keep it as green. And instead of hitting graph, usually what we do when we're graphing a stat plot is we usually are graphing data. So we'll hit the zoom, and it's zoom 9 right here where it says zoom stat. So zoom 9. Sometimes it's called zoom data. And so you can see it already sets a window for me. It's got all these values, and you can actually use the trace key. I love this. You can use the trace key and then kind of go from any of those 5 numbers. You can see the minimum. It shows you the first quartile, the median, the quartile 3, and the values down here. You can see it has this really nice border that it shows these values, and so as you click through with trace, it'll show you the values that you're at, which is kind of handy here. So this gives us kind of a little bit about, tells us a little bit about how spread out our data is. It's really not, I love to compare 2 different box plots at once. So like if we wanted to see just how old we are compared to our students. So I'm going to go to a second stat plot. So if you hit second y equals, I'm going to go to number 2 here, and I'm going to turn this plot on also. So I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to go over here to box plot with outliers. And I have a list in here called stud for students. And it's going to plot in the color blue here, or navy. So again, I'm going to go to zoom 9. So it's going to refigure the window with both groups of data there. And you can see that my student data there.
Oh.
Does this make us feel old? What do you think, Tammy? Here's our students' ages, and here are our ages. So we're pretty spread out. There's a lot of spread or variation to our data, and they're now spread out maybe 15 to 19 or something like that. It might be the ages of our students if you taught high school, and some would even be lower than that, depending what age. So you can compare groups of folks and see if there's overlap or not. We had one teacher at my school who looks like, you know, he could be 18, but he's actually somewhere in this range, 27 or something.
Well, and Jeff, I think you've hit on, I've had so many folks, teachers ask me and students, why do we have to learn how to do box and whisker? But this shows the power of that basic 5-number summary and how we really can compare the spread that's there. And just what are some questions? Let's just throw that out to the participants. What are some questions that you would want not to ask your students, but that you would want your students to ask to make meaning of what they're looking at? So what are some questions that you might want your students to be able to ask? Had a problem. Okay.
Can you read some of those out, Tammy?
Well, we don't. Is the distribution normal? I was waiting.
Okay.
Is the distribution normal? Compare the medians and the IQR. So the IQR, this is when we were looking at on the page where we have the 1 variable stat data, even though standard deviation comes into 6th grade now, this to me is the much more user-friendly way for students visually to be able to understand outliers and deviations than having to actually compute and calculate.
Yeah. So let's say that I changed a piece of data here. So I'm going to change this to a 15-year-old for this first piece of data. And I'm going to graph it again. Oh, wow, it's not an outlier. Is that true?
Because what's an outlier?
1.5 IQRs away from either Q1 or Q3. So if I take the width of this box, which is Q3 minus Q1, that length, or to kind of go like that and go about 1, it's not quite an outlier, is it? Let me make sure. I need to check something. Did I check to the outlier box?
Like outlier or not outlier?
Yeah, let me check. I did go with outlier, didn't I?
Outlier, yes.
Okay, I have to see. This is interesting. So I'm going to change this to 10. Surely 10 will be an outlier. Aha. So I just want you to see what happens. So if we have a 10-year-old in this data, it's not connected, which shows you that that is more than 1.5 IQRs outside of there. In fact, in AP Stat, my students will oftentimes, to check whether or not a piece of data is an outlier, they'll do this box plot on their calculators. And so you can check very quickly to see if something is an outlier or not, which is very nice.
It is, and I think it brings up another power of using the median as a measure of center and how the median is affected by data versus using the mean as a measure of center, and how the average is affected by data.
Yeah. And someone was asking if this is a normal or not, if the data is normal. So if we wanted to check to see if this data is normal, we could, I'm going to hit the y equals key. I want to show you kind of a neat way you can turn off one of the plots. So if I want to turn off plot 2, which was the student data, if I press enter over that, now it's not highlighted and it won't plot the student data, only the ages of the participants. And if I want to change the type of plot, I'm going to go to second y equals, plot on, and I'm going to change this to a histogram. I want to see kind of what it looks like. Oops. There we go. And so if you go to histogram, and again, I'm going to hit a zoom 9, so I get a nice window. And you can kind of see if this data looks approximately normal or not. It's actually, you know, considering that we basically took random or somewhat random 30 people's ages, it's not too bad. Normal data has this kind of a bell curve look to it. And so, like in stats, we learned that about 68% of the data is kind of within one standard deviation in either direction, and about 95% of the data is within 2 standard deviations. And if you look at that, that's somewhat, I mean, that's approximately normal, although it does have a little skew to it. It looks like it's skewed a little bit left, possibly there. So, but considering we just took random ages, it's approximately normal. It's not too bad. So that's kind of an interesting thing you can do there when you're doing that. I want to show you I kind of change gears for a second and show you something else, Tammy, because I think we have time here. This is something I use in my...
While you're doing that, Matthew just asked a question
Okay.
about if you don't have the color version, how can you distinguish between the two sets? And it is harder, but if you have SmartView, you actually have, you can at least have the color version, and pedagogically you can use it in class to help the students draw attention to which one they need. So that's another good reason to use the color.
Sure, if you go to View, and if I went to T84 Plus, you know, now I think I'd be black and white, right? I mean, that's a black and white calculator now, T84 Plus. And so on my emulator, I certainly can change the type of calculator that I'm using, which I love using this emulator in class. I mean, it's great. It's a huge upgrade from the old overhead projection screens, if you remember those.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to change gears here. I'm going to talk about random integers and random numbers for a minute. And anytime you start talking about those, it's usually I get students to actually start by having them seed their calculator, because otherwise all the students, when they follow your commands, they'll all have the same random numbers sometimes if they have their calculators and they're somewhat new. So if you hit the math key, and one of the drop-down menus is probability there. So I'm going to go to the left. That's quicker. And the first choice there under probability is random. So if I hit random, what I tell my students is I tell them to use the last 4 numbers of their phone number. So I might say 5339. And if that seeds my random numbers, now I'm going to start at a different position than someone else might. So you could have them seed their calculator by doing that. And then, let's go back to that math probability menu. And it's very handy. One of my favorite ones is number 5, which is the random integer command. and Tammy, you probably know this, but if you're not familiar with the syntax for any of these commands, if you're using a C calculator or a CE calculator, so one of the newer ones, it's got that catalog help built in if you know it's there. So if you hit the plus key under any command you don't know how to use, hit the plus key, it tells you the syntax for the command. You have to put the lower, comma the upper, and then this is in brackets, which kind of means that's optional. So then you could also put the number of elements. And then these are now soft keys in your calculator, paste and escape, are activated by graph and trace.
Hey,
So
Jeff, I'm going to interrupt you just a second. We had a really good question that I missed because I was answering another one.
Yeah.
Jeffrey asked about why do we see the calculator?
So
why do we see the calculator?
it's a good question. So if I tell everyone to do random integer like I'm about to do, and I say, so I'm going to paste this command, and I'm going to say, like, I'm going to roll a dice. So 1, comma, 6, those are the options I want, comma, I want 10 dice rolls. So I'm saying 1, comma, 6, comma, 10. So it'll generate a list of 10 random dice rolls. If students didn't seed it first, it comes out of the factory with the same seed. And so it's very possible that everyone in the class could have the same list of random numbers, which doesn't appear to be very random at all. Does that make sense? Because they come out of the factory, and if you don't use that command very often, which students don't, then it won't. They'll look at their neighbors and they'll say, "Well, they got the same list I got, but yours is different because you seeded yours." So I always recommend seeding it so that you're starting in a different place than your neighbor is, almost for sure. Because there's a huge random number generator or table inside this calculator that basically they're pulling numbers from in a certain order, and so this starts at a different spot in that list. It's kind of neat. One thing you can do with this, you can actually store this into a list. And so to do that, you hit the only hip-hop key in your calculator. It's the store command, but if you're hip-hop, you say it as stow. That's my little class joke that students like. The stow key, because you stow it. Okay, so I'm going to stow that as a list. I'm going to call this list 2. So list 2, and press enter. And now that list, if I go to my stat edit, you'll see that in list 2, I now have those 10 digits, those 10 numbers that I randomly generated. And that's kind of a nice, handy thing to do. In fact, when you're in the list, you could actually have generated those directly to a list. So if I go to the very top here, it's kind of like the formula bar in Excel, where you could type equals and type the equation. What was that idea? Someone just said rather than seeding first, what does that teacher do?
The random list and compare the answers, and then they have the conversation about how hard it is to really have randomness.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of Dan Meyer-ish in that, you're kind of establishing the need. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to seed first? And that establishes the need because they see that it's not really very random if they don't do that. So to do a command here, if I just, again, go to math, probability, and I even try this new command here. This is random integer no repeat. Let's say you had 20 students in class and you wanted to call on them randomly. So if you want to do that and you don't want to repeat, you don't want to call on the same student twice. So you could say random integer from 1 to 20. And I think would be 1. Well, how many do you want? How many do you want to call on 10 people today? Do you want to call on all 20 people? Let's say I want to call on all 20 people today. I'm an equal opportunity question asker here. And so they have desk numbers or something. If I paste that in here, it'll automatically, when I press enter again, populate this list, and you won't have a repeat in there. So 8, 3, 10, 20, 14. And so you could ask questions in that order. You don't have to show them this. You could do this on your personal handheld if you want, but that could help you just to randomly generate people that you're going to ask questions to. And I think that's something you might use in the classroom. No matter what subject you teach, it's kind of neat to, not call on the same student every time because, I mean, oftentimes it's 2 or 3 students that always are raising their hand and asking questions and so forth. There's another thing you can do, which is really kind of neat here, which is I'm going to generate like 100 coin flips really quickly here. So to do that, I'm going to again go back to the math, probability, and I know, Tammy, you're doing some coin flip stuff in a few minutes also, so this might apply to that. But I'm going to go to random integer. For my coin flips, I'm going to say that 0 is heads and 1 is tails. So zeros and ones representing heads and tails. And I'm going to do 100, or I could even do 200. I mean, I could do 200 coin flips. That would be fine. And I'm going to paste those in. And so when I press enter, it should populate list 4. Oops. There we go. Now I have 200 numbers in this list, either zeros or ones. And I guess it would be kind of difficult to count them one by one. So why don't we try it a different way? And I don't know a shortcut to this command, but there's a sum command in the catalog. There might be a shortcut. Maybe some of you know it. But I'm going to hit the second 0 for catalog. These have all the commands in the calculator here. And I know there's a command for sum in here, so I'm going to hit T because SU is very close to starting with the T. You can notice when you're in alpha mode with this little A, then all these green letters are active. So if I hit T or 4, that's the T. And now if I scroll up just a couple clicks, I bet I'm there at the sum command. And I forgot how to use the sum command, so I'm going to hit plus here and see what it says. So put the name of your list, and then if you want the start and the end there. Well, I'm just going to put the name of the list there. So I'm going to paste this by hitting trace and type in L4. So second 4 is L4. And press enter. And it sums up all of the, I guess, tails were 1. So I had 90 tails and 110 heads there in that list. And so it's kind of a neat way that you can actually use some of the lists to generate large quantities of data and kind of analyze it pretty quickly. And so those are some of the basic kind of things that we can do. There's more I could show you if we have time. Can I show you one more thing, Tammy? Do you mind?
Go for it.
Okay, so this is just kind of a neat command. If you've never seen it before, it's kind of easy to do. It's kind of hard to find though. If you hit second zoom and you go to which is format, and so if you scroll up 2 clicks, you can see there's a background. I don't know if you knew this, but your graph screen can have different pictures on there. And there's already some built-in images in there. I like this one for a parabola. So if I press enter, that will, or scroll down, I guess. I've got that image 4 now on the calculator. And if I go to, I believe it's stat calculate, and if I scroll up, you can see this weird command called quick plot and fit equation. So if I go to that, it gives me this kind of point there. Well, look at that. I have my stat plot on, so I'm going to turn that off real quick. So if I don't want that box plot on there. So I'm going to press enter to unhighlight that value. And then again, I'm going to go to stat, calc, and quick plot. So the way quick plot works is you kind of move your cursor over to, maybe a point on that parabola. Oops, went just a touch too far. And once you're happy, you can press enter. And maybe scroll a little bit up. Scroll a little over. Put another point on there. And I'm just going to put 1 or 2 more points here. And so press enter and get 1 more point on. Oops. On a handheld, it's actually easier to do this than it is on the software. Here we go. So once you get some points on there, I've got 3 or 4 points, I can do regression. So the soft key that goes with this is the graph key. So if I hit the graph key, it says what kind of regression. I'm going to try number 3, a quadratic regression. And if you do that, it'll automatically calculate. You can see it's thinking up here in the corner. That's what that means when it's thinking. And it'll do a quadratic regression right over the top of that parabola. I just think it's so neat that you can do something of that. You can even put a picture of your face and see if your face is quadratic or something. I mean, you could do whatever you wanted as far as the type of regression or what kind of picture you put in there. But I think that's kind of a neat feature. I just wanted to show it to you real quick.
Jeff,
yes.
Some people asking about where you found the quick plot and fit again, so if you want to go back and show them.
Sure, if you go to, and then you can store that by hitting the graph key again. That'll store it in y equals. But if you hit stat, calc, and then instead of scrolling down and clicking, I always just scroll up 1 click. My 10-year-old taught me that trick. I'll scroll up, Dad, it's faster, because they know how to do it. And so I scroll that one. It's the very last choice of the regressions. So it's quick plot and fit EQ equation. So let me go back to, let's see. I'm going to give you the ball there, Tammy, and let you show some of your stuff.
Let's see. Hopefully you're showing my desktop.
And that one is only on the C and the CE. I don't think it's on the 84 plus that I know.
Yeah, no, it's only on the C and the CE. So
yeah, good point, Mark.
Start tonight because at TQ a couple of weeks ago, and it was good seeing several of you there, several folks asked me in some of my sessions about their frustrations with defending calculator use. And we know in this age of next generation testing, it's really becoming an issue. So as we're moving into the probability simulation, this is the perfect opportunity to just kind of tell you my mantra that I've been doing for years. If technology is strategically implemented at the point of instruction as a tool of investigation, then it's really going to allow accessibility for challenging content to a lot of students. So I guess this slide will be there if you want it personally to share with your administrators, you can. Another thing that we need to be thinking about as mathematics teachers is we all have to own writing. So as we start moving into probability, I just wanted to throw up a cloud splash to get you thinking about some of those words that we're going to be using and how some of those words may be similar to things that Jeff just did, but how some of them may be vastly different. Because with probability, it kind of has a unique place. In elementary school, in Common Core, the emphasis on probability really does not parallel what NCTM has always done. You have your categorical data, you have your measurement data that students work with prior to middle school. It does begin to provide a foundation for statistics. About the only background students have coming into probability is with the understanding of fractions, which we all know students, 4/3 of the population has issues with fractions. So one of the things that I want you to really think about that when I'm working with students and with teachers, that I'm finding that this is not something, especially in the middle grades, that we've looked at, is that in middle school now in probability, we're talking about relative frequency. And what is the connection between that and probability and how that connection actually goes 2 ways? Because if you look at what is covered primarily in 7th grade, that's the bulk of probability if you are a Common Core or a Common Core-ish state versus what they get into in high school. So I'm going to share with you some of the things in the probability simulator. So if you know the structure of the generating mechanism, so if we're going to do a bag and draw chips, if we're going to flip coins, like Jeff showed that you could also do that with the generator versus doing the simulation, you can anticipate the relative frequency of what that series of random selections are, with or without replacement if you're doing things in a bag, those kinds of things. But what about if you don't know the structure? What if you don't know how many chips or what colors are in the bag? Then how can you approximate that? By making a series of random selections and recording the relative frequencies. And I think sometimes we work in the one direction, but we don't necessarily work in the other direction.
So you're saying a simulation, is that what you're basically saying? That those are really good to do?
Right, and to do it both ways. So you set it up so the students don't know what is in the bag, but they have to ascertain what's in the bag. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you're getting a sheet tonight that I had put together for a webinar that I had done earlier on actually probability. And you're going to have basically from the Activity Central some of the links straight to some of the probability things. We're going to look at first looking at rolling the dice. And again, Texas Instruments does a really good job of giving you student versions, usually in both a Word document or in a PDF.
I love
and a lot of people always say, why the Word? Well, here we're going to look at distributions and we're going to flip 3 coins. Now, I don't know about you, but if I am in middle school, and even if I'm in high school, and I'm working with intervention, or I'm working with students that have gaps, this is powerful to have them actually flip and develop a systematic list. So having this systematic way of organizing, a lot of our students don't come programmed for. So you can decide if you want this scaffold or not. And this is even the more powerful one when we actually come down and look at different coins. And if you remember back to the graphs that Jeff was producing, what do you think that graph would look like versus some of the graphs that Jeff did, okay? And just to show you, there are connections here, even looking at area models and connecting back to things that they did with fractions and multiplication. So I just wanted to show you that we're not going to go through it completely, but just to show you the resources, because you don't have to come up with these ideas. They're there. The teacher version gives you your vocabulary. It gives you your preparation. It gives you the calculator screens, the tips. It gives you the answers. You know, here's the Zoom stat, or as it says, maybe your students are at the point that it's more beneficial to actually have them think about the window, start making connections to what a domain is, what is a range, what is that window going to look like to fit the things.
You know, one thing that I like doing in my class, Tammy, is sometimes I'll start out with a very small actual like simulation with coins that students are actually flipping the coins, and then I'll move to the simulation with the calculator, and it makes more sense to them. I always find that if you do just a little bit of coin flipping, actual coin flipping, and then move to the data where you can do 100 coin flips or 1,000 coin flips, it makes more sense to them if they've done it on a much smaller scale. Does that make sense?
I'm glad you said that, because that's working with intervention as much as I have. It has been really, I mean, I used to do it in classroom, but it's even been more eye-opening now with all the emphasis on intervention. You know, working with students in groups of 3, and Jeff, just like you say, start out with the concrete. Let somebody be the manipulator minder. They have coins. They have a bag with chips. They're actually going to kinesthetically deal with whatever it is. And then that second person is going to scribe the results. That third person is going to be the calculating computer. They're going to perform the simulation and compare. And working and building that is just really huge. So if you look here, you can see on the emulator, I'm using the black where Jeff used the white. I actually have my stuff at the bottom. So I'm selected apps, and you can see that ProbSim is number 9. Okay. I tell my students I'm lazy. When I use this, like Jeff showed, it gets away from me, so I just choose 9. And again, you can see it here, so you don't get the same ideas. These are the soft keys. So these are these keys that are a bit disconnected if you don't have the top of the calculator here, but they are the soft keys there. So let's just start looking at tossing coins. So I want to go in and I want to set, which is my middle soft key, which is my zoom. So I can do one trial. I can do 50 trials. I can use 1 koan, 2 koans. I can use 3 koans since the activity called for 3. I can graph either the frequencies or the probabilities to start with. Let's just do frequency since that connects back to what Jeff did. And then I do want to store, and I just say store it all, unless you just want students to say, I want 50 pieces of data. It is going to clear the table and overwrite. I usually have them do that. And then you can have them update after 1, after 20, they can walk through it, and then OK is here. And you do have to click OK. If you do not click OK, you do not get any of the settings. So yes, I'm sure, and notice it's now going to make me click on the other side. So there's always a built-in check for them. So now I'm going to toss. You actually see the 3 koans. Okay? So now I can do 10 more. I don't get to see all 10, but I get to see the last one.
How did you do 10 more? What did you click?
The +10.
Oh, okay. Oh,
And
the zoom key. Gotcha. Oh, the zoom key activates that key. Gotcha.
+50 is under the trace.
Okay.
So right before my eyes, I can see the data changing. Now, I'm going to escape to go out and actually now get to look at my data or my table. And I just want to look at my data. So here is data that, if you notice, it tells me that I need a list called toss. I need a list called C1, C2, C3, and total heads. So do I want to save it? Yes. And at this point, just to show you what the table would look like, there's my table. Now, one of the kind of constraints here is that actually right here, I really can't do anything with this data right here. But how did I switch the screen? I went here to data versus graph.
Robert had a different comment. He said that he sometimes shows the screen so that you can see the soft keys. So the screen's right above the keyboard, yes. I guess.
Yes.
Does it make sense?
Yes, and I don't have mine set to do that right now.
Yeah, right.
But yes, you can do that. So at this point, I'm going to actually escape out, and I'm going to return to the main menu, and I'm going to quit.
Okay.
And again, I'm going back and forth, so I can't accidentally leave it unless I really intentionally want to. Now I can go to stat. So I'm back here kind of where Jeff was. So I've already got my tosses in there. One thing that I find students and some teachers may not be aware of, I actually can insert a list and name it. So second, insert, which is over the delete, and we need a C1. So alpha C1, and look what happens the minute I hit enter. There's all that information.
Oh, wow.
So now I need a C2, so second insert, alpha C2. Magically, there it all is. Now I need a C3.
Can you try this? Hit second stat and see what happens. Second stat right there. Okay, instead of typing C3.
Oh.
I just want to see if it's there.
Oh, it is. So I could go here to
there it is. You can grab it from that also, yeah.
But I've got to, let's get
Sorry,
to delete that.
twice.
Yeah, because I've got it from both places. And then I can enter. I'll do it on the next one, Jeff. So over to the list I want to insert before, and this does insert before. So when you insert, you're inserting before the list you're over. So second insert. Now if I go to stat, or a second list, excuse me, I'm going to scroll up, and there's my total heads.
Yeah.
And there they are. So now I can go back and do all that stuff that Jeff was doing with his data, because now it's in real time and I can deal with it. That is one of the limitations of the ProbSim, is not really being able to look at data there. So I know we're getting close to running out of time, so let's go down to look at marbles. And this is huge because, again, I can differentiate. That's another thing that we're all asked to do now, is we need to differentiate and intervene on the fly. So if I set this up, again, I can have 2, 3, 4, 5 different types. I can store the table, but I want to go down here to advanced. Remember I said frequency, we can go both ways. Frequency leading to how many there are gives us probability, but knowing how many there are and going back to frequency gives us our statistics. So that's the connection between the statistics and the probability. If I go to advanced, now I can wait and play with.
Oh, wow.
In the classroom, something that I would do, I would only use this as a teacher tool right now. So I would go in, and you could do this with 2 colors, 3 colors. They could be the little colored discs, they could be marbles, whatever you wanted them to be. And I can seed this ever how I want to. I could let there be 20 of those, 5 of those, no black. I could let there be 6 of those, and I could leave that one 10. Again, if I don't click OK, it doesn't take it. So now, if I want to do my trials, I'm going to click OK, because I've got it there. So I'm going to click OK. Yes. So now when I pick, okay, the students start recording the data. And now the students have to decide based on the data. So I can go to 10, middle soft key. Now they start deciding what's in the bag. And that's not a way I think we normally use the app for the simulator, but it's a powerful teaching tool to design a simulation that way, because the students never see, so they don't know what you seeded it with.
That's a really interesting thing you're bringing up, and I love the multiple representations you've got here. So you've got, you're seeing it come out, you're seeing the graph of it, and you're making decisions on what you think is actually in the bag there. That's really interesting. I like that a lot.
Yes, and it's way cool, way cool. So, and again, once you're done, if you want to go to 50, and once you're done, so from here they should be able to ascertain what. What would be some questions that you think your students could figure out just by looking at this? Do you think they can figure out I probably didn't have any black?
Huh.
Maybe there were more blue,
yeah,
almost as many green. So, you know, it's just kind of cool. Now, I do want to show one more thing too. When you roll the dice, again, if you want a way to differentiate, to do intervention, you have the same activity going in the classroom. Again, if I go to set, notice all of my platonic solids are here. There's our cube, there's our octahedron, there's the decahedron, there's the dodecahedron, and there's the icosahedron. The decahedron's not a platonic solid. But through the number of sides, I can differentiate the cognitive demand of my students and make it a more rigorous task for some students than others. So just some things to think about there. So at this point, we are close.
I just have one more question for you, Tammy, because it's come up in the chat window, which was, I know we're about to give it off to Michael, but someone wants to control, I mean, they could do a dot camera and have their actual camera, and show their calculator.
Yeah.
They want rather, remember the SmartPad app they used to have for TI-84? Do they have something like that now where you can actually control your software with your calculator?
Yes.
Just tell us what is that called? Is it a setting or is it a
SmartPad? Hang on. Let me pull.
Oh, is it SmartPad app still? Is that what it's called?
Yes. Let me pull this over and let me just show. Here are the apps. I'm on the TI page.
Yeah.
If I go to the TI-84 CE,
Yeah.
and find. So here's the probability.
Oh,
If
there it
you
is,
haven't
SmartPath
updated, you
app.
don't have it. And here's SmartPath.
Oh, they have it for CE, so
Yes.
you can hook up your calculator and use that to drive your emulator rather than your actual emulator.
Yes.
Oh, that's really cool. They have the
And
SmartPad app for the
it's
new
much better than the old
CE.
version. Much better than the old version.
Oh, and it works so great. Like, it connects so well. The new Connect class is really nice. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So hopefully that gives everybody some ideas.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Tammy. I appreciate that.
Michael, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Tammy. As we begin to wrap things up tonight, if you have any last-minute questions for Jeff or Tammy, please feel free to try and get those asked. I know they'll do their best to try and get them answered. When you leave the webinar, a brief survey will automatically appear in your browser. As you fill out that survey, we get the information back and help provide information back to us that can be used in future online events. So please feel free to share your thoughts in the post-webinar survey. We have some great T-Cube summer workshops that are currently available. There's, I believe, over 50 workshops that are offered across the United States. And these workshops can focus in different areas. Maybe you're looking to strengthen your content this summer, or your technology usage, or maybe your pedagogy usage. And we have workshops that focus in any of these 3 different areas spread out across the United States. So please feel free to visit our website to learn more. And as I mentioned earlier, we are giving away 1 free T-Cube Summer Workshop registration. And tonight's lucky winner is Nancy Kraft. So Nancy, congratulations. And we'll be in touch over the next couple of days over email. I know Jeff and Tammy shared a lot of really interesting things tonight, and there was a lot of excitement generated about some of the things that maybe you haven't seen before. So please feel free to continue the conversation on any of the major social media outlets. To receive a certificate of attendance, go ahead and click that link in the chat window. Also listed is a link for the documents, which I know many of you were looking to get as well. And if you happen to miss it, don't worry, you'll automatically get a follow-up email within a couple days. I know we did our best to answer questions that were asked tonight, but there were a lot of questions that were asked, and if we didn't answer all of your questions, please feel free to follow up with us. And it could be a question as simple as, well, how do I update my operating system on my TI-84 handheld? Or maybe something more complicated. Either way, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, Jeff and Tammy, for all of your time and your expertise tonight. I know I picked up on a couple of tips and tricks, and I hope everyone else did too.
Great. Hey, I loved it. Thanks for letting us do this. And the participants were awesome. If you read some of those comments, they knew more than us sometimes. It was great. I learned a few things from y'all. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and Myra just asked a question about graphing X equals, and we were just looking at that Monday on a webinar that I did. If you're in the inequality app, you actually get the option of doing the X equals.
Great, so in order to graph X equals on the 84, you actually have to be in the inequalities app?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks again, Mike. You did a great job.
Back online next week. Have a great night.
Night.